Zungu, the constable, is no longer his main witness. Absalom Zungu is his main witness. But Absalom Zungu hasn't come to testify because Absalom Zungu's testimony is hearsay. Oh, this case.
And I'm bad like the Barbie. I'm a doll, but I still wanna party. Being felt like I'm ready to bend. I'm a 10, so I pull in a 10. Like Daddy.
Hello and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Ndombela, also known as Kwazi Bear on all social media platforms. Do subscribe, be a part of this family, and if you are a returning subscriber, welcome back, darling. Now, as you know, every week I give you a weekly analysis on the Senzo Meyiwa trial, and I'm here to do exactly that. Now, without wasting too much of your time, let us get right into the proceedings of the week. So on Monday, we are back in court after the long-awaited break, and Advocate MNISI was indeed ready to cross-examine Brigadier Gininda on behalf of accused number 1. Firstly, they confirmed the appearances for all the accused, where MNISI does now represent accused 1 and 3. Ramusipile is still representing accused number 2. Numalo still representing accused number 4. And Mshololo still representing accused number 5. However, Mshololo was not available in court on Monday, so Numalo was going to be standing in for her. MNISI commences cross-examination on Monday, and the very first aspect that he touched on was with regards still to accused number 3, of which Gininda sort of had a problem with it because he felt that the cross-examination of accused number 3 or on behalf of accused number 3 was completed. MNISI then reminded Gininda that when they left off, he had provided statements or warning statements from all over the country. And basically they had required statements or sworn statements that actually come from the police stations that those various warning statements were collected from. It came to the attention of Advocate MNISI that although Gininda says he has provided all of the statements from all the different police stations, the defense was not provided with these statements. So there was a warning statement from Hearsay, if I'm not mistaken, and there was apparently a statement, a sworn statement by an officer that worked at that station that the state had not given to the defense. However, Gininda does indicate that he did give that statement to the state. Now, when concluding the cross-examination with regards to accused number 3, MNISI does touch on the DNA aspect of the evidence that has been led before the court, and he basically says the state wants us to believe that accused number 3 was the shooter, and the people in the house, or the witnesses that were in the house, do say that the person that came in as the first intruder, accused number 3, was wearing a hat on the day of the incident. And then he touches on the issue of DNA, and for some reason, guys, I still believe that Gininda are doing this on purpose because DNA is clear. Mr. Masetla did come to testify before the court. He was clear that the DNA excluded all of the 5 accused. But the judge, Gininda, they seem to have a different understanding of the DNA evidence. So if you guys are a bit confused about the DNA evidence, I do have a video on my channel that speaks to the DNA. You can go and watch that video. Now, after the break on Monday, MNISI continued with his cross-examination, where he now touched on the issue of Constable Zungu and how he approached the commissioner, and how the commissioner then approached Gininda, and how Gininda then met up with Zungu in relation to information that he had with regards to the people that were involved in committing this crime. Some of the questions that MNISI asked were in relation to what Zungu said to the commissioner, of which Gininda responded and said he has no idea what was said to the commissioner, but in essence, after Zungu spoke to the commissioner, then Gininda was called. And my understanding of this is that regardless of the fact that he was not there when Zungu spoke to the commissioner, the fact that the commissioner then called him is an indication that Zungu clearly said that he has some information. Now, I highly doubt that Zungu would say he has information and not tell them what information he had at the time. So, as far as Gininda is concerned, he never asked Zungu any knowledge of the case or anything like that, which is in contradiction to what Zungu told the court when he said he was constantly asked what he knows, and what he said was angazi luto. So now how is it that Gininda is saying Zungu was never asked anything because Zungu had said to them that the person who knows about what happened is his father? Then all of a sudden Zungu tells us that he was asked numerous times what he knew, and he told the police that he knew nothing because he wanted the police to do their own investigation. Guys, now, another important question that MNISI asked was with regards to the team, the investigating team, and if Gininda actually did tell the team that he had been called by the commissioner and the commissioner has referred Zungu to him, and this is the information that Zungu has brought forward. He asked, did you then go back and tell the rest of the investigating team? And what he says that he cannot recall, but he does think he did tell Ramohale. Now, Ramohale was one of the other investigating officers that were a part of this team. Highlight of the day on Monday for me was when MNISI asked, when Zungu referred you to his father, you then made a meeting and arranged for you to go and meet the father. That's where you obviously got the statement from his father. And Gininda then agrees. And then MNISI says, when you met up with Zungu Senior now, did it come to your attention that this person had first-hand information with regards to the case, or that he had heard it from someone else? Gininda went back and forth, but clearly from the answer that he gave, Absalom Zungu actually heard it from a person that heard it from another person. So basically this is like triple hearsay. So how is it that the accused are in court through triple hearsay? Because remember, Gininda has now flipped the script. Zungu, the constable, is no longer his main witness. Absalom Zungu is his main witness. But Absalom Zungu hasn't come to testify because Absalom Zungu's testimony is hearsay. Oh, this case. Gininda then says he really doesn't remember what Absalom Zungu says, and that he would like to refer to the statement of Absalom Zungu to get the details as to who exactly told him. And according to the statement which he read onto the record, Absalom Zungu was told by Senzo that he overheard some other people talking that Ntanzi and accused number one, Moses Meyiwa, were involved in the killing of Senzo Meyiwa. So you see how this is triple hearsay. The judge then asks if Ntanzi actually is still alive, and the response that Gininda gave is that yes, he is still alive, but he refused to be a part of this whole thing. He refused to come testify. He refused to give a statement. So why are we here? And basically we concluded Monday with them just reading that statement and basically it being clear that this whole statement by Absalom Zungu was hearsay. On Tuesday, we continued with the cross-examination, and MNISI picked up where he left off, where he continues to say, you know, the whole case, the whole state's case is just a trial of hearsay evidence. He also then says he doesn't know whether the statement will stand because it's clear that it is hearsay evidence. Baloyi then says the fact that the defense is the party that introduced the hearsay evidence, they should sleep in the bed that they made, basically. So if you remember, the statement of Absalom Zungu was brought in by the defense when Ramasipili was cross-examining Constable Zungu, and he then brought it to his attention that there is a statement in the docket, and he asked whether Absalom Zungu is his father, where Zungu did respond and say yes, Absalom is his father. And when Ramasipili asked if he was aware that his father has a statement in this docket, Zungu then said no, he was not aware. MNISI then continues with his cross-examination where he touches now on the arrest of Moses Meyiwa. And when I say the arrest, I'm not referring to the arrest on the 30th of May. I'm referring to the very first arrest in March of 2019, where he testified in the trial within a trial to say that he was initially arrested in 2019 and he was questioned on the Senzo Meyiwa case, and there were some officers that were there. He mentions the likes of Constable Zungu, he mentions Lishabane Lishabane, he mentions Makubo, and this was confirmed by Makubo. So he continues MNISI to cross-examine with regards to the incident that did happen at Klurkop, and Gininda says he basically had no knowledge of the incident. He was not there. All that he does know is that accused number 1, when he was arrested in March of 2019, was actually arrested on a case of drugs. Now guys, I want us to be very clear when it comes to this case of drugs. According to Moses Biya, when he was arrested in 2019 March, he was arrested for the Senzo Meyiwa case. Now, because the police decided to let him go, I remember Mgomezulu even saying, Sbiya even said, yo, sizotini ku commissioner. Remember that statement. Then they decided to take Muzi to the police station and they opened a case of drugs for which he was released on, which later then became warrant of arrest, where Mohola becomes involved and he's arrested the following year and still questioned on the Senzo Meyiwa case. So in my opinion, Muzi Spia's drug case is non-existent. Interesting thing about the conversation in the cross-examination is when the judge interfered and says, well, General Sibiya and Lishabane are far senior than Warrant Officer Makubo, but Warrant Officer Makubo made a decision that Muzi Sbiya was not responsible or was not involved in Senzo Meyiwa's case, and the General and Lishabane simply just agreed with him. Now, MNISI had a problem with this statement because he says, firstly, if you have any questions as to why they agreed with him or why them being in higher power, they listened to Makubo, you should call those people to come to court so that they can answer those questions, because Gininda has clearly said he was not there, so he won't be able to answer on their behalf. And the second thing is that Makubo made a suggestion. It was a suggestion, and the fact that he's a warrant officer and the general let Sbiya go, it means that the general and Lishabane actually agreed with Makubo in saying this person is not responsible, because if they did not agree, Muzi Sbiya wouldn't have been let go on that day. Do you understand? Like, they wouldn't have let him go. They wouldn't have let him go. So regardless of the fact that Makubo is a warrant officer and he's a junior, it does not mean that he does not know his job. It does not mean that the general did not agree with him, because clearly the fact that Muzi Sbiya was released, the general, who is in a much higher position than Makubo, does agree with the sentiment of Makubo that this person was not responsible. The question that MNISI asked on Tuesday was with regards to the fact that Muzi Sbiya was arrested on the 30th. Now, there were days in between that led then to Ntanzi's arrest on the 16th of June, which is days much later than Muzi's arrest. So he then asked, were there any significant things that happened between the 30th, when Muzi was arrested, to the 16th, when Ntanzi was arrested? Then Gininda says he would need to look into the docket in order for him to answer that question. MNISI also touched on the issue of the DPP and their involvement and how the investigation was conducted, and also he touched on Uperimal. Now, if you remember, Zungu mentioned this name quite often, and so did Gininda, because he was one of the people that was said to lead the investigation, as there were disputes between Buthelezi and Makubo, as well as Gininda and his team, who believed that they were intruders, whilst Makubo and Buthelezi believed that there were no intruders. Now, one of the things that Gininda mentioned is that when he went to the DPP office, that is when he first had sight of the second docket, which is docket 375. Now, we've heard a lot about docket 375 in this case, and we are aware that that docket talks about the defeating of justice when it comes to this particular case, because Makubo believed that the people in the house were basically concealing evidence and hiding what really happened on the night of the incident, and obviously everyone else who was involved in covering up what really happened on the night. Now, some of the things that Gininda mentioned is that there's only one docket when it comes to the murder of Senzo Meyiwa, of which MNISI then says, if you're saying there's only one docket, what does 375 have then? Because it is defeating the ends of justice in relation to murder, in relation to the murder of Senzo Meyiwa. MNISI does then request that MNISI does then request that we adjourn so that he can look at some documents. And the judge says, well, I thought you read all the documents. And MNISI says, I'm not a computer, so I have read the documents, but I need to go back to this particular one in order for me to continue with my cross-examination. Those were the proceedings for Tuesday. On Wednesday, the 21st of March, the cross-examination does continue. But before they continue with the cross-examination, we had a little history lesson from the judge with regards to the late Duma Nokwe. He then continues with his cross-examination, where he does say that the document that he wanted to go check yesterday was the record where Zungu, the constable, testified, and he wanted just to confirm the information with regards to the presence of Makubo and other officials on the day that they met at Kluerkop. Now, the judge, for some reason, does just mess up all the information on the record, because he then mentions Kloof, which I have no idea where he got that from, because the location was Kluerkop. The interesting thing about the cross-examination on Wednesday is when the name of Lishabane came up, and for some reason the court seems to have forgotten that Lishabane was meant to be called by the defense, and the state refused for the defense to call Lishabane, stating that Lishabane is a witness of the state, and therefore the defense cannot use him. The state later then said that Lishabane is not available to come and testify for the state, so therefore they will make him available for the defense. There was a continuation of the cross-examination where MNISI was going in with a toothbrush, literally, through the details of the DPP and what was presented to the DPP. Gininda does mention that he presented the docket and a memorandum whereby he basically explained the case in detail to them, and then a decision was taken. Now, when MNISI cross-examined about the DPP, it seems to make Baloyi really uncomfortable, because the amount of objections that he had on the day were countless. Now, as MNISI is asking Gininda about the details and basically a summary of what the memorandum actually said, in order for the DPP to make a decision, then the judge wants to quote a section 179, and he says, Balo, you should read the section, which had nothing to do with what was going on in court. Advocate MNISI then says, the accused have a right to know why they are before the court and why a decision was taken for them to be before the court. And the judge keeps saying, no, but it's the DPP's choice. It wasn't Gininda's choice. And MNISI says, that is why I want to know what Gininda had told them in order for the accused to actually be here. And some of the facts were left out by Gininda in the memorandum. As MNISI is explaining this, the judge says that he is going to overrule MNISI, and as MNISI says, can I please assist the court? And the judge says, I don't want to hear it. If you have a problem, you'll take me up on appeal. And then he makes Gininda read basically his whole statement. So as MNISI is posing questions to Gininda, Gininda then says, this has already been covered by all the advocates, and also advocates MNISI has already asked me this. And then advocates MNISI responds by saying, remember Gininda, I'm now representing accused number 1. If I had asked you this question when I was representing accused number 3, that's a completely different story. So I don't understand what you want the court to do with the fact that I've asked you this question already. I'm now representing accused number 1, and if he has requested me to ask this question, that is exactly what I'm going to do. Then MNISI touches on the evidence that was provided by Gininda, where he says that accused number 1 boasted to his friends in the homelands what had happened with Senzo and how he was involved and that sort of thing. And MNISI then says, so that is basically the nature of the circumstantial evidence that you provided to the DPP that you had when you were providing your memorandum to the DPP. Then Gininda then says, no, there's also some witnesses and statements in the docket that I did refer to when I was presenting my case. Then MNISI then reminds Gininda once again that up to this point, all of those statements, all of those witnesses are basically hearsay. So it says, Gininda, I know that you're aware that none of the people from the homelands that you say are witnesses have come to testify before the court, so therefore it is hearsay. And also what you presented to the DPP is a confession by Umboto. Then Gininda then says, no, I actually provided the whole docket. So they had a look at the whole docket in order for them to come to the decision. MNISI asks about the planning of the murder of Senzo Meyiwa, where he says, you say that there was a planning that was done at the hostel. Gininda says, yes, there are statements that say that this was planned at the hostel. And then he asks, whose statement are you referring to? And he says, Kwabini. Where MNISI then says, we've already spoken about Ukwabini and we've already said that all that is hearsay evidence. He then also questions the issue of the communication between accused number 5 and Kelly Khumalo, and he says that he will not dwell on the issue of the communication because they found that there are some discrepancies in the evidence of Colonel Steyn and Hearsay, etc. That's where an argument then came about, where Gininda started answering, for which I don't understand what he was answering, because MNISI didn't ask a question at that point. He had made a statement that the evidence of Colonel Steyn is questionable, so I'm not even going to go into that. So why does the judge expect Gininda to respond on that? Because it wasn't a question, it was a statement. But the judge then asked Gininda to respond, and MNISI is like, no, there wasn't a question in that. And then there was a whole argument about whether MNISI had asked a question, and for some reason Baloyi says that Gininda was actually answering a previous question that MNISI had asked, for which they had already passed that question. If I'm being honest, like, if I listen to that record, that question was asked, it was done, and we moved on to the next step, which was talking about the evidence of the cell phone, whereby MNISI says there were contradictions in the evidence, and he's not going to touch on that. Now, whilst that argument is going on, Judge Rata decides to bring up the issue of the XDS system, right? And he says, no, Steyn talked about an XDS system and so on and so forth. And MNISI then says, if the courts, with regards to what the courts is talking about, and then the judge is quick to say, no, it's not me who says it, it's the witness. And I'm like, today is today. Steyn is not in court. You're the one that's bringing up the XDS issue, and then you want to say, no, but it's the witness that said that. What witness? Because you are the witness today. Like, Judge Rata, you need to stop. Now, on Thursday, due to the arguments that arose on Wednesday afternoon about whether or not MNISI had asked the question, they requested for the record to be played. So on Thursday morning, we started with the record being played for a good 30 minutes before then Gininda started to answer, because MNISI did then ask a question, and he took literally 20 minutes to answer one question. I kid you not. During the process of him answering the question that MNISI had posed to him, Gininda started sort of character assassinating some of the accused that are before the court, stating that based on the investigation that they did, they already found that these people were doing this, which was character assassination. And MNISI then warned him that he is well aware that he is not allowed to do that. And he then said, well, it's a good thing that the judge has already said in the past that they're able to separate trash from wits, basically. He literally called that evidence trash. Continues with the cross-examination with regards to the DPP and the process that was taken and the memorandum that Gininda submitted. Baloyi then objects and says it's the third day now that counsel is busy with the same thing. There really is no reason to be going on and on this very point. And MNISI says, well, you basically cannot tell me how to cross-examine because I am laying a background for the questions that I am going to ask. He then touches on the issue of Kelly Khumalo and a warrant of arrest for her that was not authorized, and he went into finer details as to what was submitted, why was it not authorized, what was the reason that was given. And the explanation that we got from Gininda is that when he submitted the information, it was said that he needed to do further investigation. So the way that I see this, the DPP said, no, what you have here is not enough. And in 2020, what they had is what we have heard in court. So basically, if the DPP said that the information, meaning the cell phone records and everything else, was not enough for them to arrest Kelly, why are we here? Why are we here? Because Kelly is the mastermind. She's not arrested. There's not enough evidence against her. How does that work? So as MNISI confirms Gininda's answer to say that more investigation was required with regards to Kelly's connection to this case, then the state objects and they say the witness says he doesn't know. MNISI's response to that is, clearly the state is listening to a different case, because the witness has just answered that question and said the reason why Kelly was not arrested, or the reason why her warrant of arrest was not authorized, is because they needed to do further investigation. So what does the state mean the witness can't answer? Baloyi, sometimes you just object for no reason, honestly. Now, this comment rubbed the judge up the wrong way, because when Baloyi responded to that, he says that this acerbic way of talking by MNISI is really just not professional, or not the way in which they should be addressing each other, and he requests that he withdraws that. And then MNISI then says, this acerbic or what? Like literally the statement sounded like, hey, when I'm it's acerbic, that's on you, child. Then the judge says what he's saying is acerbic is basically your comment that they are listening to another case, because it sounds like you're saying batagiwe. Atumnisi, well, I never said that. That's the court saying that. This is what I said and I stand by what I said. Nisi then continues to go on to say, once the DPP has received whatever, there's a process that is followed. They need reasonable prospects of success. They need admissible evidence. They need relevant and admissible evidence. They need circumstantial evidence. And then there's like basically a whole process that needs to be followed in order for them to make a decision. And Gininda does agree with this. And then says, so once the DPP saw your presentation, they were happy that you have done an amazing job, but still decided that this was not a robbery, that this was not a contractual killing, and it was a robbery gone wrong. How is that so? Because if you've done your job so well, then the DPP should have said, if you're saying it was a contractual hit, let's go with contractual hits. Let's indict these people on a contractual hit, and let's go forward with that in court. But instead, they brought the indictment, and the indictment says robbery gone wrong. How did that come about? Now, MNISI then says the DPP couldn't say that it was a contractual hit after they had read the whole docket and your memorandum. And then Gininda says, no, I wasn't told. How were you not told? Because they asked you to go do further investigations on Kelly. That's because they didn't believe in your docket. How can you not be told? And then the judge interjects and says, no, wait, this is your own imagination. And MNISI says, no, it's not my own imagination. I didn't thumbsuck this. This witness has told us that once the DPP saw his docket that says it was a contractual hit, they still decided to indict these people on a what? On a robbery gone wrong. So basically, they didn't agree. That's exactly it. It's a fact. They didn't agree with Gininda's docket. MNISI then goes on to say an indictment is represented to courts for specific reasons as to why the accused are arrested. And Gininda says, yes, I'm with you with that. And the DPP couldn't find alignment with what you gave them, right, with regards to the contractual killing. And then Baloyi then objects and says, no, section 144, subsection 3, there's substantial facts and it's not binding on the state, and he quotes. And then the judge requests him to read the section 144. And then MNISI asks if he could respond. And in his response, he says, I'm not here to blow my trumpet, but we need to understand this contextually, right? In the indictment, it says this. The indictment is the reason why these people are here. And the indictment says theft. Now, you cannot put theft in an indictment and then when you come to court decide you're going to add, you're just going to say murder. You can't do that because the indictment is the reason why you're there. So you can't change the foundation. I love the example that he made because he made it very easy, very simple to understand, because he says when you are building a house, you have a foundation. Now you cannot change your foundation, right? And basically the indictment is the foundation of the case. Now that the foundation is laid, you can then decide, oh, in my plan, my window was going to be on the front. Now I want to make it on the side. That you can change, but the foundation remains the same. Love that example because that is exactly what is happening in this case. You came to court, you told us the reason why you're arresting these people is because it was a robbery gone wrong. Now, mid-case, you're telling us it was a contractual killing. That's the foundation. That's the foundation of the case. It cannot change. It cannot change. Then as MNISI is talking, the judge interrupts him and MNISI says, no, I'm not quoting section 144. I am responding to what the state has read. And the judge says, oh no, it's fine. I'll read section 144 for myself. And MNISI basically says, well, I was not done speaking and you have interrupted me. And then the judge then asks Baloyi to continue talking. And MNISI is like, no, but I'm not done. And he says, no, but I asked you. The judge says, no, but I asked you. At what point did the judge ask MNISI if he was done? Because he didn't. He interjected while MNISI was talking and now is requesting that Baloyi speak whilst MNISI is still busy talking. Like, it didn't make sense. That moment for me was just like so disgusting to watch, to be quite honest. Then MNISI goes on to say that the defense doesn't dispute that a murder happened because obviously Senzo did die, but under which circumstances did that murder happen? And finally, he then says, I put it to you that the evidence that you have led in this court in trying to prove that there was a hit or a contract or assassination, it does not match with the indictment and therefore it is irrelevant. And I was like, not us spending months and months and months on irrelevant information, because that's what we've just done. We spent months listening to this case that is said to be a hit, and basically the indictment says nothing about a hit. Crazy business. MNISI continues with his cross-examination where he touches on the actual arrest of accused number 1 on the 30th of May, and he goes into the people who were involved and what happened on that night. He then talks about Gininda's involvement in Mukhola bringing accused number 1 to him, and he says, so accused number 1 was brought to you at night in the darkness. All of this was happening in the darkness, and basically Gininda says, well, it was at night, but the accused was in a car and the lights was on, so he was able to see me and whilst we were continuing with the cross-examination, MNISI then indicated that he was actually tired and they requested that court adjourned 15 minutes earlier than it was supposed to. On Friday, the 23rd of May, we continued with the cross-examination, and the first issue that we touched on was the fact that MNISI had requested certain documentation from the state and he had still not received them, mainly the information of the AVL of the police officers that were involved in the arrest of accused number 1. Now, yet again, the judge decides to bring in information that we have no knowledge of when he mentions the VAL. Now, no way or no one in this case has mentioned anything about the VAL, but here the judge is bringing in evidence about the VAL and photographers and when MNISI then says, no, you do not understand, like you don't understand where I'm going, and the judge says, no, I do understand. Jonathan posed a question was posed to Jonathan, and Jonathan referred to the AVL, and the thing is, Jonathan didn't speak about AVL. Jonathan did not speak about AVL when he came to testify. The only thing that he did talk about is that his unit was disbanded, and I think their pocketbooks were unavailable, or logbooks or something to that effect were not available for the defense when they requested requested them, but nothing about the AVL. Now, as MNISI is trying to explain to the judge that you've actually got your wires twisted, you're not giving us the right information and you're not listening to what I'm saying, the judge says, MNISI then says he is actually frustrated, and the judge says, by what? And MNISI says, I'm starting from the beginning. Every time I try to talk, I'm taking a very dim view on the fact that I'm being treated like a child, because every time I try to talk, you're speaking over me, you know. And after that moment, literally the judge went silent, and then MNISI then explains what actually happened with regards to everything that they have requested. He said that initially we had requested the AVL for the red Golf that Mohola was driving, and it was brought to our attention that that vehicle did not have AVL. We then said, because that vehicle did not have AVL, we then requested the AVLs for the other vehicles that were involved in his arrest. So basically, we require the AVLs for Buthelezi, who was part of the people that arrested him. We require AVLs for Abo Jonathan and the Metro Police people that were actually involved in the arrest of accused number 1. And that is when the judge then asked Baloyi then stood up and spoke about the red Golf and said that, you know, Dupree has come to testify about the red Golf, and he did say that that vehicle didn't have AVL. That's when the judge started requesting every single thing. And in my mind, I'm like, there's no way. This judge is acting so weird. I feel as though this is already planned. They've got all this information already sitting there. Again, guys, this is my opinion. But his reaction to all of that, to me, was just not like him. He then requested AVLs for Jonathan. He requested AVLs for Buthelezi. He requested AVLs for every single thing. Do you hear me? He was like, Dupree did come to testify. Yes, he came to testify. Bring him again. Dupree needs to come again. The issue of the Fortuna, bring it again. Bring the AVL for the Fortuna. Bring the AVL for Buthelezi. That's when now Baloyi says Buthelezi was driving the red Golf, or was in the red Golf, which is a lie, guys, because if you remember the evidence of Buthelezi and Mohola was driving the red Golf. Buthelezi had a partner, I think it was Sadiki, if I'm not mistaken, or Munareng, but Buthelezi had a partner that he was with, that they met with Mohola with, in order to go and arrest accused number 1. So there's no way that Buthelezi was the red Golf holder or red Golf driver. Buthelezi had his own vehicle that he shared with his partner that they took to go and arrest accused number 1. And on top of that, accused number 1 says he remembers very clearly the officers that were there, of which the records for their vehicles were requested as well. Now, amongst those officers are 1, Buthelezi, 2, Bongani from the EMPD, 3, Ngamani from the EMPD, Munareng, and Mapumulo. So those are the AVLs now that the judge has requested. And then the judge goes on to talk about an Alfa Romeo. He says someone was driving an Alfa Romeo. Guys, there was never an Alfa Romeo. He then goes on to say the Alfa Romeo, they pressed the seats against the legs. Now he's talking about accused number 2. That's how confused our judge in this case is, because there was no Alfa Romeo. It was a Golf GTI. We're not talking about accused number 2. We're talking about accused number 1. He's mixing evidence for accused number 1 with evidence for accused number 2. It's just a mumble jumble in that judge's head, I swear. Then the judge then says, Mr. Singh from EMPD, he needs to come back. He needs to bring the vehicle details and Baloyi then says Buthelezi's car was involved in an accident. The judge says bring the accident report, bring the photos of the car, bring the registration, bring everything. And then they're like, yay, accused number 1 once reported that he was beat up in Silverton. Bring the AVL for the vehicle that transported him from Silverton to the prison. Bring the AVL that transported him from the prison to the courts. He requested everything. You hear me? Every single thing. I was shocked. And whilst they were at it, Ramusipili decided, hey, I'll get my moment as well to request some things as well. And he says, can we also get the AVL for the hard body and the EMPD officers that took Untanzi to Magistrate Cronier? on the day, because all those officers that ran away when Cronje asked for their documentation, they were there. We need their AVLs. I was like, Judge Rata is literally coming for everything. And the panic in Baloyi's voice, Ramsipili also took on the opportunity to request the AVLs for the day where they took accused number 2 to Dr. Tlokwe. Those AVLs were requested as well. And whilst he was at it, he's like, Nxumalo, if you also want your AVLs, tell me what AVLs you want. And I'm like, what is going on with Judge Rata? All of a sudden, because MNISI has told him that I don't appreciate you treating me like a child, now Judge Rata is all of a sudden doing the right thing. I'm like, what? And Nxumalo is like, no. Before the comments for Nxumalo, the Advocate MNISI then says, also, whilst we're at it, can we also get the AVL for Zungu that says he drove from there to Carltonville, from Carltonville he then went to Basutu Hostel? Can we get the AVL for that as well? And the judge's like, Nxumalo, you might as well add your own AVLs as well. Nxumalo's like, well, there wasn't any transportation of my clients. However, that Zungu AVL will come in very handy. So all AVLs, every single thing related to vehicles, etc., was requested by the judge. And obviously, because it is information that might take a while, according to the state, they have decided that they will be calling another witness for the time being whilst they gather all that information. So basically, the state does have a witness, which they say is going to be a short witness from the LPC who is going to testify. I'm guessing in connection with the FFC number that MNISI had spoken about with regards to Mchiako. That will be very interesting. They say it is a short witness. Now, the interesting thing about this particular witness is that the judge asked if this is a practicing attorney that is actually coming to testify. And Baloyi's stuttering made me very worried about the witness that is coming, because he says an admission was not made whether this person is practicing or not. So in all honesty, I don't trust the state bringing someone from the LPC who is not practicing to come testify about a person that we know was not practicing when representing accused number 2. I don't feel comfortable about that witness, but we will see what that witness has in store for us on Monday. So we have adjourned for the weekend. Those were the proceedings for the week. And also another thing that MNISI does actually mention on Friday is that as the defense for accused number 1, they will be requesting that 2 witnesses be recalled, namely Buthelezi and Zungu. So guys, we've been wanting this moment for a long time. The judge in response to this says that they need to address him about what the law says. They need to bring authorities. So everyone on Monday, I'm guessing, will bring their arguments as to whether or not MNISI can recall Jabulani Buthelezi from EMPD as well as Constable Zungu. It will be so lit if those 2 can come back, because there's so many things that were left unasked, I feel, from Zungu. And also I feel that MNISI will do a very, very good job when it comes to this time around. So hopefully they will allow him to recall those witnesses. We will hear on Monday, and then as well that witness from the LPC will be available. Those were the proceedings for the week. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video and you enjoy your weekend. I will see you guys again next week. Bye.